If charts and sales can be manipulated, how can we accurately measure an artist's success? How can we make sure SB19 success will be measured accurately and objectively? People say streaming platforms like Spotify and Apple Music aren't reliable because of mass streaming. Same goes for YouTube views. Every award show these days are rigged or is rigged or based on attendance in both Korea and in the international scene. US digital sales don't count because bigger groups and fandoms have unions that mass buy. Album sales don't count because of numerous versions and digipacks, and also the fandoms actually mass buy as well. Like, seriously, how do we ensure that SB19's organic success is measured objectively? Okay, that's such a loaded question and also a very difficult question to answer, but I will try. Okay, one is, let's just put it into perspective and be sort of reasonable about it. Just because one fandom is doing it doesn't mean that all fandoms are doing it. Asian fandoms or Western fandoms, okay? There are some fandoms who aren't doing it. They're simply listening to music and not mass buying and not mass streaming. Okay, so that is just because one fandom or certain fandoms are doing it doesn't mean the rest are doing it as well. Next is that before mass streaming and mass buying, the rigging actually happens on a corporate level. It's actually so the charts have always been rigged. So it used to be that the music executives would actually pay DJs or the stations to play their songs, and because Billboard actually measures the spin, then the more spins they get, the better the relationship between the label and the radio station, that the more spins that they will get, then the higher chances that they get to rank in Billboard Hot 100 or others. Okay, so at the end of the day, the charts have always been rigged. So you just choose which rigging you want. The rigging that was done by the executives or the rigging that was done by the fans. Just choose your poison. It's always been there. But again, just because one fandom is doing it doesn't mean all fandoms are doing it. So, but yes, one way or another, it has always been rigged. Okay, if you want to call it rigging, some people would just call it marketing. Next is that sales is still an indicator, right? At the end of the day, you still want to measure not just the sales isn't just about purchasing something that you need, but also your loyalty to a certain brand. And it happens even to like brands like Nike, for example. There are people that would collect Nike sneakers and they wouldn't even wear it. They just like it, so they buy it. they like how it looks, that they'll buy it. That is no different from somebody who wants to buy an album just because they like it, even though they're streaming it. But they'll buy a CD even though they're already streaming it because they like it, right? So it's not purchasing. Consumer purchase is a complicated thing that we need to sort of come to a certain level that would be measurable, and sales is one of them. So sales is still an indicator. Okay. The other thing is that you still need volume. Even when there is mass streaming, you still need volume. I don't know if any one of you have actually seen fandoms that are campaigning that are actually raising funds so that they can mass buy stuff. I don't know if you know this, but if you've seen any of that, most of them don't get thousands and thousands of dollars. Many of them will just get $500 or $1,000. They would raise like $1,000, $10,000, $5,000, and that's not a lot of copies. There are some fandoms that would raise like hundreds of thousands, but there's not a lot. So at the end of the day, you still need the volume. You still need a lot of people working together in order to mass buy something or buy more than one copy or buy more than 2 copies. So it's still the volume is still a factor. Quantity is still a factor in them. There's a chance, of course, that there's like 1 or 2 millionaires out there that would be willing to donate $100,000 in order to mass buy. That's of course a possibility, but that's more an exception rather than the rule when they actually raise funds to mass buy. If you want to, you can just go on Twitter, just raise the if you know the keyword to search for, you will see that many of them would actually raise like $1,000, $500, not much. Okay. Next is consistency. So if an artist releases like every 10 years and sells like 100,000 copies, that is not as great as somebody who would release every year and would consistently get 30,000 sales. Because then you know that you have like a specific share of the market that would always be there to support you. So if, for example, SB19 would continuously increase their sales by 10%, that's a better trend rather than having a release that sells 10,000 and then the next sale would be the next release would sell like 1,000, and then the next release will be 2,000, and then the next one will be like 20,000, right? That's not a good metric because they're not consistent, as opposed to if they're consistently 10, 11, 12, 13, 14,000, then you know that there's a specific, as I've said, there's specific market share that will always be there for them. Okay. Next is that you do need to go beyond the number. For example, I think it's a brilliant marketing tactic on the part of YG when they pulled the price down of Blackpink's album. They pulled it to $3.99. So in Billboard rules, it has to be $3.94 at least for that to be considered an album. So they put it at $3.99 versus SB19, for example, that sells their CD for $20. So for every one SB19 album, Blackpink is selling 6. And at the end of the day, Billboard is going to count the end number, not quantity, not revenue. They will be counting quantity, not revenue. So, so as I've said, you have to go understand the numbers, not just look at the number and say, oh, they sold 100,000 or 5 million. Yeah, but they were selling it for $3.99. SB19 is selling it for $20. Just want to clarify, I'm not hating on the strategy of Blackpink. It's their hustle, their business. I actually think that's a strategy that many people are going to do next. They will start pulling down the price of their CD to make it to the charts. And I do not have any problem with that. That's a rule that Billboard put forth, and they're just following the rules. Next is the impact. So those are the quantitative ways that success may be measured. Then there's the qualitative, which is actually a harder thing to do because it's qualitative. Some will argue that it is actually subjective. So the quality of the music is one. Talk about the quality of the music. There are different aspects of the music that you can actually look at in order to emphasize the quality of the actual song. So lyricism is one, and that's sort of the easiest because it's a little bit more tangible. There's words, and then how those words may be interpreted. A lot of pop songs count on buzzwords and catchphrases. SB19 does not do that. They actually create songs that have substantial meaning. Just being able to compare like the messaging of their song to those of others, and just emphasizing and highlighting the different messages, that in itself is a good way. You can also talk about the poetry of the actual lyricism. They actually write poetry. As you know, in a poetry, you use metaphors, similes, personification, oxymoron. So all of those things they use. So if you can like identify the poetry of something, their wordplay, the way that they would use, they would reinterpret a certain word or a certain sentence to add layers to that meaning, so that a one line or a certain stanza may mean several things. Just being able to talk about that is a huge advantage. So that's one, lyrics. You can also listen to how the message actually relates to the beat. You know, they may be able to create songs that is actually tragic, but it's an upbeat beat, right? The juxtaposition of that would be a good thing. You know, analyze how they were able to use the irony between the lyrics and the beat. Now, another thing would be, if you can actually identify the uniqueness of the melody. There are a lot of melodies that are very common, and you know that's fine. But then they've created some of the most unique melodies that I've ever listened to. Watawat and Bazinga are two songs that are just the melody is different. The other thing is that it may require a little bit more listening to, or a little bit more of an immersion, but being able to identify the beat, how the use of their instruments. I think, like, I have always been amazed of how they've been very, very not basic, but SB19 has the uncanny ability to use instruments, only the instruments that are necessary. They don't pack their songs with so many layers that you don't really hear and see the uniqueness of what they're doing. So if you have the ability to do that, then talk about that. Then you can talk about another thing is the creative control over their own music and over their own creative, actually, not just their music, but their videos, their choreography, and all of that. If you can continue emphasizing that, because that's very important, then you know you're emphasizing that SB19 isn't a typical boy band where they're being fed the music and being told how to act and what to say. They actually they're actually artists. They just happen to be put together by a label, but they're actual artists. Next is their actual impact in the music industry. I don't know if you realized it, but SB19 is going to be forever named as one of the pivotal music acts in the Philippine music industry. The boy band in itself is not a new concept in the Philippines. I've talked about this. We had Hagibis in the past. So we had Apo Hiking Society. So VSD and company. So a lot of that we've had before, but in its current form, it was SB19 that broke that boundary, because they made it. Then it sort of opened the eyes of many Filipinos into this specific format of boy groups. And that's a pivotal thing, because they were the ones who did that. So in the future, when you look back at history and see the movement, the trend that the Philippine music industry has been in, they will forever be a pivotal point. Like, they will be an important act forever and ever. So that in itself, being able to talk about the impact, that would be a huge thing. Now there's now starting to expand their reach to outside of the Philippines, so we will see what kind of impact that they will be able to make. Now, how do we make sure that everyone is on board? Is sort of how can we sort of make other people realize this thing, their success, how good they are? One is we need to go beyond the number. There's so for example, Blackpink sold their albums for 1 week for $3.99. That's rock bottom. So you need to be selling your album for at least $3.94 for you to be qualified in Billboard Hot 100 or Billboard 200. So, but SB19 is selling their album for like $20, I think. So for every one SB19 album, Blackpink is selling 6. I'm not saying that they're competitors. I'm just their marketing tactic. I'm just comparing a marketing tactic. So, but at the end of the day, what Billboard is going to be concerned about is the end number. Like, okay, so, but at the end of the day, Blackpink sold 100,000 copies, but if you look at the revenue, maybe that's a different story altogether. So at the end of the day, it will still be. We will have to look beyond the numbers, and it will be up to us to actually talk about it. Make sure that whatever SB19 is doing is being understood, not just known, if I'm making sense. So it isn't just about the end number, but how they got there as well. By the way, I'm not hating on the way Blackpink did, the way YG actually did their marketing. It's their hustle. If they want to sell it for $3.99, that is absolutely their business. They did not break any rules. That was within the bounds of the limitations of what Billboard provided, and they followed it. And I do think that eventually other acts are going to did what they is going to do what they did. So not hating on them. It's their hustle. Absolutely legal. There's nothing wrong with what they did. That's something I will do. Next is that we just need to be very loud in our support for SB19. We need to talk about them on Twitter, on social media, because that's a free way of doing it. But we also need to be loud in our support in terms of streaming it, watching their videos on YouTube, and also to other people. Like, we can recommend their music, we can talk about the quality of their music. Let's just forget about the hate war, the fan wars, the hate and stuff like that. But just concentrate on the quality of their music and use that as a subject matter, as a topic of conversation with other people when it's appropriate to do so. Next is that we need to make allies and enemies. If we have enough of a hill to get over. Waging war against other fandoms won't make it easier on us. It's just going to add to the hurdle that we're going to experience. So if you want to support other groups, go support them, but don't do it in the name of SB19 of 18. It's not, it's a silly thing, really. Going into fan wars is a silly thing. Just support the artists that you want. Don't drag them down. Don't drag anybody down. And just concentrate on supporting SB19. We have a long way to go, but we'll get there if we can work together. So I hope that answers your question. Those are the ways that the success of a group or an artist may be tracked. And those are the ways that we can make sure that SB19's organic success may actually be highlighted and not buried into history. Thank you.